Hi there, Aaron Walter here. If you're hearing this, you're not currently on our premium subscriber feed. Design Better premium subscribers enjoy weekly episodes, 4 episodes per month in total, rather than 2, all ad-free and invitations to our monthly AMAs with the smartest folks in design and tech. You'll hear a preview of this episode, but if you'd like to hear the full conversation, please consider becoming a premium subscriber at designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. It's just $7 a month, and it supports not only your personal growth, it also makes our work at Design Better possible. The podcast is available to everyone through our scholarship program. If you can't afford a subscription, email us at subscriptions@thecuriositydepartment.com, and we'll help you out.
My view on myself and my life is that I am creativity. Everything is a part of the creative process. Everything that I do, every interaction, every book I read, every YouTube video or podcast I listen to is a part of my creative being.
There aren't many kids who start a record label when they're 12 years old, or play piano professionally at the age of 6. But our guest today, Marcus Bellringer Bell, is the kind of polymath that did just those things and went on to create a successful career in the music industry as a producer and a composer who's worked with musicians like Nicki Minaj and Snoop Dogg.
Marcus has also created one of the first AI-driven artists, fusing his own musical skills with GenAI persona Rayvn Lyte. We talked to Marcus about what inspired him to do this, as well as the ethics of AI-generated music. We also discuss his creative process and how he manages to fit in creative time amidst raising a family and other domestic duties.
This is Design Better, where we explore creativity at the intersection of design and technology. I'm Eli Woolery.
And I'm Aaron Walter. You can get ad-free episodes, discounts on our workshops, access to documentaries like Design Disruptors and our growing library of books, as well as our monthly AMAs with big names in design and tech by becoming a Design Better premium subscriber. It's also the best way to support the show. Visit designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe to learn more. We'll return to the conversation after this quick break. And now, back to the show. Marcus Bell, aka Bellringer, welcome to Design Better.
Great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, Marcus, you've been doing some really fascinating work with AI, creating an artist using AI, and we want to dig into that. But it's always fun to start from the beginning. You've been involved in music since the very beginning. You played piano at a very young age, I understand. And you grew up in a family where excellence and achievement, they were just sort of like, this is what you saw. This is how life is. Tell us what life was like as a kid. What's it like in your house when you were growing up?
Well, the first thing is that I grew up in one of the most impoverished areas in Virginia. And I didn't know that until later when I saw affluent areas in my life. And it was a unique thing because even though the neighborhood was underserved community, that isn't the way the experience of my life and, like you were pointing to, the surroundings were. So my mother was a national tennis champion who had played in the US Open back in the 60s. And she used to travel the country with Arthur Ashe, and they played in a bunch of different tournaments, right? So she was a tennis prodigy. It was 2 years from the time that she had a racket in her hand to becoming a national tennis champion. In order to do something like that, you have to have some practices, right? And that's one of the things that I learned from her early on was that if you want to become excellent at anything, then focus, attention, what I like to call intentional imbalance, where you're kind of moving other domains of life out of the way so you can focus on that thing it is that you're either learning or creating or launching or like periods of that. What I had as a unique ability was the ability to focus for long periods of time. And so as a kid, I could sit there and just like play with pennies and play with rocks and marbles and all of this for hours. And my parents noticed that and they said, why don't we try them on piano? So they got my grandmother's piano and brought it into the house. And like most 2-year-olds, they usually go to the piano and start banging away, right? I have a 9-year-old daughter. And when she was 2 years old, I saw how she interacted with, instruments, right? That's not what I did. What I did was go and touch the key intentionally, the other key. And they're like, whoa, huh? Okay, let's try them in lessons. So that led me into like having a discovery that I was like a child prodigy musician. And that just kind of started a pathway of a deliberate practice and having aims that were worth waking up for and creating from.
I'd love to learn more about your practice. So you talked about this imbalance, this intentional imbalance that you create. What does that practice look like for you as a child and then today as, someone who's constantly creative? What choices do you make? Are there specific routines that you follow?
I remember sitting at the piano with phone books under me and practicing. And I remember hearing the kids outside running up and down the street playing, right? And my father said this a few years before he passed. We were in a conversation and he's like, yeah, when we started you on piano, like those kids, they were out there running and a lot of those kids ended up in jail or dead. You became Bellringer. And that is the advantage of intentional imbalance in certain situations, right? Because I had certain amounts of time that I needed to practice before I could do any other activity, right? And so that trained me having like a discipline around study. And it was fun for me. And I realized later on what happened when I was practicing. So it became meditative. My practices became meditative. I didn't know what that was about until later on that when I played and really got into it, that I would constantly and consistently be achieving flow state. So when I listen back to recordings of when I was a teenager, for example, like I was playing way beyond my level, right? Because I was in flow state in performances. And so I'd be able to do things that I normally wouldn't be able to do in practice.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I mentioned before we started recording that we recently spoke with Kamasi Washington, who's a jazz musician, and he had a similar story, both about the level of focus he was able to achieve, but also how, he grew up in South Central LA and a lot of his peers may have ended up in places that he said he could have ended up there if it wasn't for music and that way that it just kind of centered and focused him. And I'm curious if the kind of mindset and the focus that you have, is that something that while with music, it's a net positive thing and it's helped you achieve many things you have. But are there other areas of life where it's challenging, where you're like, oh gosh, I'm fantastic at music, but I'm terrible doing my taxes, or like other areas where like a challenge is that there's these particular abilities kind of surface.
Yeah, the thing that comes to my mind is that there's this kind of narrative in the world about if you're not good at something, that you have to like learn that skill to do a thing. And I used to be that way. And so I would put myself through all kinds of hoops doing things that didn't really make sense for me to do until I realized that, well, actually, if I double down on the things that I'm good at, then I can hire someone to do the other thing. I can get an intern or get, a volunteer or some help to do the other thing. Or I can find a technology to help do that thing, right? And I call those time multipliers. So it's more for me about the best and highest use of my time, my energy, the resources that I have, and not do the things that I am terrible at. And so this is where collaboration with others comes into play. And even though I believe that I could develop an ability in a particular area, doesn't mean that I should. And just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. I share this all the time with some of the participants in my programs. Like I have a program called Wealth and Impact Bootcamp, where things like time multipliers is a big thing because of what I notice, not just with myself, but with others, how time is something that is not necessarily farmed in a way that produces a great crop for people. So I've done exercises like doing time audits, for example. This is a quick kind of tip, if you will. Like if you measure what you do half hour by half hour or 15 minutes by 15 minutes or hour by hour, whatever makes sense for your world. And then you make a list of those things and then evaluate that list and say, okay, what are the things someone else can do for a less expensive price, whether that's free or just, like that versus how much your time is worth? Then there you are. Now, all of a sudden, it's optimizing our time resource in the most positive way.
We were talking before we hit record. You managed to fit in creative sessions in between tasks. And I think that's fascinating because a lot of people think about the creative process as like, I have to have the right setup, the right situation, the right space and time. And we've even heard that from folks like John Cleese and how he blocks off time for the creative process and protects that. But I found it fascinating, like in some of the videos on your website where you're writing music in your studio, your daughter comes in, she's asking you some questions. You've just picked her up from school or from camp or something like that. You're just sort of like squeezing in a session and still able to be productive in like, I'm making a thing. This is sort of interesting. I don't know if this is going to be like a hit song, but I'm making something and I'm going through that process. Almost like a calisthenic. Talk to us about that. So you're doing these time audits. How do you fit in these creative sessions into small time blocks?
Let me create a little bit of context for this. My view on my self and my life is that I am creativity. So everything is a part of the creative process. Everything that I do, every interaction, every book I read, every YouTube video or podcast I listen to is a part of my creative being. And what I've discovered is that all of the experiences throughout a day all kind of come into whether it's the music or whether it's writing or whether it's putting together some presentation, all of these things end up coming out in the products, whatever the product may end up looking like. And so when I wake up in the morning and I have like a creative idea, like, oh, I wonder if I could create an AI that does this and does that, like that could write a podcast script. Okay. So I jot that down. If you look at my phone, you could just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll the song ideas, the tech ideas, the business ideas, and so forth. Like as long as I've been doing this, thousands. If I wake up in the morning with a seed, by the end of the day, there is a plant that has been created. So my daughter coming in and getting ready for school, and my daughter, by the way, she's 9 years old, little Melly. She is a part of my creative process because she is also a creative, right? Her energy coming into a room is in the music. And in addition to that, she's learned from me that the creative process is something that just happens as a lifestyle, right?
Hmm.
Well, it used to be a time where I would do like the person that you mentioned, which is like set aside time. Okay, this is my focus time to whatever. But now, once I came to the realization that I can be creative all throughout my day and work on a song or many songs throughout the day, right? So we would maybe start something here, or I would start an idea here. Well, I'm driving her to elementary school, I'm playing it on repeat and I'm playing around with ideas. And she's in the back of the car, like, oh, and if she likes it, then probably a whole lot of other people are gonna like it too. So when we recognize that we are creativity and that everything that it is that we experience as creativity, as opportunities for growth, as life experience that we can incorporate, then there's no bounds to how to be able to create.
Just rewinding to your own childhood again for a minute, it sounds like you have something of a rare combination in that you get the creative side, but you also understand the business side. And this may or may not be true, but from what we've read, you started a record label when you were 12 years old. Now, Aaron and I were talking like, I don't think either of us knew what a record label was at that age, or like,
I still don't totally understand the domain of a record label.
something to do with business and music, though. So there's some overlap there. And yeah, talk us through a little bit that path you took, which is there's this intersection of understanding both the creative side and the business side, which isn't always the case for artists.
Yeah, I like to think from what's possible based on whatever's in front of me, right? And I didn't know that I was a futurist until I met some futurists and became friends with them. And they're like, oh, Marcus, you're a futurist. I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Well, when I was a kid, my mother, when my parents divorced, she, being the futurist that she was, recognized that my father wasn't going to necessarily be around and participating. So what she did was she reached out to people to become my mentors. And so I had like the president of the Family Channel, I had executive at Eminem Mars, and she would read about somebody in a newspaper and reach out to them. She would see them on television and reach out to them and say, hey, will you mentor my son? So early on, I had these powerful African American men in my life that were, businessmen, they were politicians. I would play at politicians' events and so forth. So I was getting exposed to a lot of people with specialized knowledge in different areas. And those mentors became my first investors. And the what's possible came out of I was doing a lot of performing when I was, 11, 12 years old. And I started touring. I did this school tour one time, and it was like thousands and thousands of kids that I was seeing. And by that time, I was already writing songs and whatnot. And I started integrating them into my performances and so forth. And I said, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to be in front of all these thousands of people, then that's an opportunity for me to sell my music, right? That's an opportunity for me to do that. So how do I do that? And it's like, oh, well, there's a record label and so forth. Well, okay, well, what's possible? How could I have a record label? Right? So I didn't know what I was doing. So from 12 years old to the end of high school, it was all about, oh, I walk into a record store and I see posters. And I'm like, mm, I think I need some posters. Reach out to my mentor. I think I need some posters to go into the record store. Right. And so I would get a budget and go get some posters made, with the help of my mom and whoever else was around. And we found a designer. And so I understood like the design process and the considerations and having to do photo shoots. And so there were so many different aspects of artist development that I was experiencing with what was possible. And then I later discovered that when I went into the record stores back then, they would pull down and make space for my stuff. So I started doing like in stores and signing autographs, and my songs were on the radio and everything, right? And what I realized later when I started working with major record labels was that that space is paid for. The record labels would pay for the space in those stores. But here I was, I guess those stores were investing in me. And so a lot of times there are things that have happened in my life where people have invested in me, but I didn't have the context that they were actually making an investment and they were taking a risk in me. I'm so grateful for, having all of that.
Yeah. So you've got a pretty unique and impressive creative process, but you've also had the unique opportunity to work with a number of other people and see other people's processes too. Wonder if we could talk about that a little bit. Talk to us about the different approaches that you've seen with working with folks like Nicki Minaj, Snoop Dogg, Timbaland, and others.
Yeah. So when we talk about creative processes, I'm one of the unique music industry people that I've never done drugs. I've never drank alcohol. I've never used some type of external anything to try and open up my creativity. Not that I have anything against anybody that does that, but I've seen, firsthand the dependencies that are created from the feeling or the impression that, okay, this substance makes me more creative. Okay. And there may be some truth to that based on what I've learned with some of the neuroscientists that I've been collaborating with. There are some truths that people get free of themselves and are more open, right? As a way, but I don't believe that that's necessary. I believe that we have unlimited access to creativity. And so coming from that, I've played around with so many different ways to create by myself and with others. So whether that's, oh, let me just open up a book and then just randomly point to something and take this sentence and turn that into a song. Or let me start first with the lyrics and then create a song around that. Or let me start with just a piano and then build from there. Or let me just beatbox something in a microphone and then create the whole song around my voice. Or let me just open up one of the music programs and just go through and just pick a sound, any sound, and try and turn that into something. Let me just sample something and see what happens with that. And then, oh, well, wait a minute. If I'm working with others, what if I wrote a big band arrangement or I've written orchestrations, right? Like, what if I have the orchestra do these dramatic swells and what would that sound like? And so when I work with different artists and other producers and songwriters over the years, I've seen a wide variety of creative styles and abilities. So I'll give you one example. So I'm working with an artist right now. She's a big star in Europe. Her name is Gala. She's one of my long-term collaborators and songwriters that I've produced. And she had a big song called Free From Desire, which has been, she did the Olympics this year. It's like classic across Europe. Everyone knows the song. Like it's like one of the biggest songs in dance music history, right? So we've been working on a new song, right? Because she just got a deal with Sony. And so we are working on this song. Well, her process, for example, with the song lyric, she spent about 14 hours on the song lyric before coming to me. And it's a song that we wrote about 10 years ago, okay, that we're bringing back, okay? And so last night, while my daughter was getting her hair done, or hair did, like they say in some places, she was getting her hair did, I was out in the car on Zoom, going back and forth and reworking the lyric and saying, okay, that's not quite the right word, or how does that sing? Okay, that's a great line, but how does it flow and how does that sing? Because when we think about how it sings, I'm thinking about her in a stadium, right? And having to project that out in a stadium. I've performed in front of, 80,000 people. And so I know what that's like and being able to project that energy. And so that experience impacts even the lyric writing because I'll choose, an open word so that, more can be expressed. I know it's a podcast, so you can't see my mouth. I'm opening up my mouth, right? As opposed to the, it's a different thing. And so there's that. And then there are creatives that I've worked with that you put the microphone on and a beat and they can freestyle a hit song, right? They can freestyle something that sounds like a hit, and all you have to do is just record it well, and then create, the environment for that hit song possibility to be realized. So these are completely extreme different ways of creating, and there's everything in between. And I realized a long time ago, I'm able to create music very quickly because I've been doing it so long. I have like these processes that make it easier for me to move quickly. And because I want to get the artist in a flow state, I want to be in a flow state with the artist so that we can create something exceptional. So one of the things that I was doing at one period of time, which is why I've written over 5,000 songs in my life, is there was a period of time where I was doing like 10 songs a day in multiple genres. And when I was building that muscle, it was a very useful muscle to build because it allowed me to be able to, I can perform in whatever environment as a producer and songwriter, right? So I'm able to pull from my experiences in that way. But here's the thing. When you have a hit song, it's like that one piece, like an example of my friend Gala, that one song has been a career. And so it's as valuable working slowly as it is being quick.
Marcus, I'm curious if you ever find yourself having different modes or approaches to work. So to get some context, we've talked to, say, a film composer like a Brian Tyler, who he's executing on a very specific vision that he's maybe collaborating with a director on, or back to Kamasi Washington. He might kind of see himself in more of a self-described blue-collar role, like playing the saxophone or composing something, again, executing on another artist's vision. And in some cases, an artist might find that a little stifling and want to go out and do their own thing. Certainly he did, and I believe Brian Tyler did too. So do you see that at all, or is there more sort of like transparency between your modes of working?
Yeah, I operate from a place of abundance with all things. It's not a either or, it's a both and. And as someone who is an artist and works with other artists, when I'm collaborating with someone else, whether that's in business or whether that's in music creation, a third thing emerges. There's the acknowledgement of where someone else is, and then that just becomes a part of the whole thing. This is part of the jazz musician. But, way back in my past, I've done a lot of pop music and hip hop and, rock, had K-pop hits and all that kind of stuff, right? That jazz training really prepared me for life, being flexible, being able to build upon a situation, being able to see possibility. And like they say, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. So it might be messy in the middle, but as long as we end on a good note, then it's not going to create dissonance for those that are watching.
I love that reference to jazz because it really is like this open mentality. It's discovery and excitement of what you could stumble upon together. Do you think about that? Is that a fair definition for you of how you think about jazz and that approach?
Absolutely. Even like this conversation that we're having, right? We're stumbling into things as this conversation evolves. And sometimes they're stumbling into places that we want to stumble out of, right? So I've been in situations where fortunately I was able to stumble out of those situations. I remember I was in a recording studio one time working with a hip hop artist in New York, and he came in to the recording session and, he was intoxicated and so forth. And I don't know what he took, but he was exhibiting very unusual behavior. It was creating a block in our process. His manager was there and intervened and basically pulled him out of the vocal booth and said, okay, we're going to end the session here, and walked out with him. What I didn't know is that he was carrying a gun. And
if you'd like to continue listening to this conversation, you'll need to subscribe at designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. Once you do, You'll get access to every full-length episode, all ad-free, monthly AMAs with inspiring people in design and tech, and recordings of all our past AMAs. The podcast is available to everyone through our scholarship program. If you can't afford a subscription, just email us at subscriptions@thecuriositydepartment.com and we'll help you out. Your support makes Design Better possible. Invest in yourself and the design community by subscribing at designbetterpodcast.com.
Design Better is supported by Masterclass. We're lifelong learners here at Design Better. Eli and I, we're always reading and expanding our skills and pursuing new interests. And I have a hunch, as a Design Better listener, that you're probably the same. The best way to expand your knowledge is with Masterclass, which lets you learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn from over 200 of the world's best and brightest. And when I say best and brightest, I'm talking about people like learning writing from David Sedaris, learning about the Stoics and philosophy from Ryan Holiday, learning about fashion and design from Anna Wintour, and learning about creative leadership with Shonda Rhimes or Martin Scorsese, or learning about ecology from Jane Goodall. I mean, these are amazing people. I learned a ton about business strategy from Bob Iger's masterclass, and Eli is a huge fan of Neil Gaiman's masterclass on storytelling. Where in the world can you learn from this many brilliant people? With a masterclass subscription, you get access to all of these brilliant teachers and many more who cover a vast array of topics that will help you professionally and personally. Plus, you can access Masterclass on your phone, your computer, your smart TV, or even in audio mode, so it's just so easy to learn. Right now, Design Better listeners get an additional 15% off an annual membership at masterclass.com/designbetter. That's 15% off masterclass.com/designbetter. Visit masterclass.com/designbetter to sign up for one of our favorite learning platforms around.
Design Better is supported by Doer. Eli and I are very busy people. When we're not in the studio producing the podcast and publishing new articles, we're often doing something active and creative. We're building, we're cooking, or on an adventure with family. Work and life blend together. Doer makes clothing for people like us. Doer creates performance denim and lifestyle apparel that is made for doing. And their new stretch canvas pants are perfect for work in the office, the kitchen, or the workshop. The stretch canvas pants have stretch fibers for comfort and ease of movement. They've got this special treatment for weather protection and back and thigh pockets for extra utility storage. They're super practical and they just move with your body. I've been wearing the performance denim jeans, the slim versions like skinny jeans, and they're just so flexible and stretchy and they feel great to wear. Eli, what have you been wearing from Doer?
Yeah, I got one of their tech fleece denim jackets in black color. And it's really nice. It's soft, it's comfortable, it's warm enough for those fall days that are just kind of creeping into the lower digits. And yeah, really loving it.
Check out Doer's flagship stores in LA or Denver, or order now at shopdoer.com/designbetter. When you use our exclusive URL, you'll get 20% off your first purchase. Just go to shopdoer.com/designbetter. That's shopdoer.com/designbetter to save 20%.